General Vagon has called the Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
Welcome to the Lead Pursuit Podcast, a podcast covering Blood Red Skies, a game of World War II aerial combat.
Hey everybody, welcome to Lead Pursuit Podcast. Tonight we've got Brett and we've got Kevin from Miscellaneous Miniatures. We had such a great time with him last week, we decided to bring him back on the show. Doug is still over in Malaysia, so he'll be back with us shortly. But tonight, since it's the miniatures, guys who are the heavy painters, and Kevin from Miscellaneous Miniatures, who is both a heavy painter and a wonderful decal maker, we decided we'd get knee deep in a hobby-sode. So that's what we're going to go into, and welcome aboard, guys.
Howdy.
Hey, Chris, Kevin.
All righty. Well, we'll get right down to it. I mean, what we wanted to go through tonight is first thing we want to dig into is Kevin's tutorials. And Kevin, where do you got your tutorials posted at for the audience?
Right now, they're on the miniatures page. It goes by the miniaturespage.com or also just TMP.
Okay, guys, definitely go check those out. He has got some amazing stuff up there for painting just about anything, painting aircraft. And we're going to get links, some of them up on the Lead Pursuit podcast site this week. So which one do you want to go through first, Kevin?
I guess we could go through the resin one. The first one I put up there, it was probably 12 years ago. It was a 1/100 scale I-16 from First Armaments and Miniatures. That tutorial pretty much covers soup to nuts on how I worked with the resin model, cleaning it up, filling the very few little defects in it, priming it, painting, putting decals on it.
Yeah, that was a really great tutorial. I mean, I've been working with resin for years, but I went back through it and it was refreshing stuff for me. Resin can be a challenge, but I, for one, find it really rewarding over other types of models. One, just the ability to warm it up, quickly bend it into any position you want is just something that makes it such a dream to work with. And one of the things that's a big challenge, I was glad you covered in your tutorial, was just cleaning resin. So what process do you use for cleaning resin?
For cleaning it, normally what I'll do is straight out of the bag or something, I will scrape off the seam lines. And once the seam lines are done, I'll put it in some warm water with dish soap, like Dawn detergent, something like that, just to get the mold release off. Then I'll go back and do the fine cleanup, either sanding off little blemishes, filling holes, and then back into the bath again before I prime it.
Yeah, that type of stuff's so common with resin, the little bubbles from the casting process. Actually, I've been amazed at AIM stuff because I get stuff from Forge World all the time, and not to badmouth GW, but they've got about the worst casters in the business. And I can tell you that Dave's a mom and pop operation, and I have yet to get a bad cast from him. And I know it's because he personally is taking care of everything, and his quality control is just above reproach. And it's nice not to have to do that level of cleanup. And I found that he doesn't have a whole lot of mold release to begin with on his models. It seems like they're pretty clean when they come. I mean, you do need to clean them, but
right. And that's one of the things I noticed about Dave's stuff as well is it's and I think he uses a low pressure system where he kind of sucks the air out of it, whereas like you said, Forge World and some of the other companies, you'll find one side it has a lot of air bubbles on it. They all rose surface.
Yeah, it's something I've never understood, considering the premium price that they charge for their miniatures, that we have so many flaws in the casting process. Like I said, Dave's just doing a bang up job.
Yeah. The other thing I like to do with resin is to wet sand it. Either take it over to the sink with some fine grit paper and run the water while I'm sanding it to keep all the dust flying all over.
Yeah, because resin, it's not as big a problem with the airplane models because they're so tiny. But yeah, I know working on large resin tanks, and when you're grinding down a lot of the gates that you have on larger stuff, it's a really, really big deal. That stuff's not a good thing to breathe. So yeah, wet sanding is definitely the way to go when you're cleaning it up. On the wet sanding track, I know we've been talking about Flory washes a little bit. And when I ordered my Flory washes from High Altitude Miniatures, I also picked up, Flory also makes sanding discs, they're like tongue depressors, that kind of shape. I mean, you see them in a lot of different model lines, but Flory makes a whole set of them, and you can get them from High Altitude, and it's basically like every type and grit that they make of it. It's like a $12 pack, and it's about 3 times what you get when you order sanding stuff from most people. And they work really well for wet sanding also. So that's something, if you're looking for good sanding stuff, that's definitely a route to look at.
Yeah, I have to
Actually
check
call
out.
that kit their starter pack, right? It's got a little bit of everything in it.
Exactly. It's basically like everything that they make in one little pack. And I'll just keep buying that because it gives you a wide variety of every grit that they've gotten in a couple different thicknesses. And because the thin ones are so nice for getting down in those aircraft seams, and especially on those belly lines where you can't get a tongue depressor. So having something that's like, a little bit over or a little bit under a 1/4 inch wide is just perfect for getting in there.
Grab that too with the intent of trying them all out. And, I could always, that site at High Altitude Hobbies, they sell all the stuff individually too. So if you find a particular bit that you like, you could just buy a whole bag of those too. So looks like a pretty good kit. I've yet to I'd already prepped my 109s I'm working on, but when this next batch comes, I'll be busting those out.
Yeah, I did it with my Spitfires this morning, and I did it with Dave's P40s the other day, and like I said, they were some of the best sanders I've ever worked with. A lot of the sanders, if you get them wet, they've got a cardboard kind of material holding the sandpaper on, and that stuff deteriorates really quick. But the Flory ones seem to have more of a sponge consistency to them, and they seem to handle the water a lot better. I don't know if they were designed for wet sanding, but it seems like they were better designed for wet sanding. So what are you using, Kevin, when you're doing your sanding? What product?
Either the real fine sandpaper from a place like Home Depot or sanding sticks that I picked up from Squadron.
Yeah, Squadron Shop's where I get a lot of my stuff too.
Yeah, I'll have to check the High Altitude.
Yeah, that High Altitude Shop, we didn't know anything about them, and when we had John Russell on from Warlord, he threw the Flory wash out there, and I think me and Doug went that week and ordered it, and I'm a true believer in it. Like I said, there's a couple of applications it doesn't work great for, but personally, I was doing Spitfires today, and those Spitfire panel lines from Warlord aren't real deep. It took to those panel lines just perfect. It's just so easy to get good panel lines on a model with it.
Yeah, one of the other things.
I was going to ask you, how'd you use it? Do you use it like a pen wash this time, or did you just do it kind of all over
No,
and
man,
wipe it off?
And there was a big difference and the difference that I noticed was if you use the Future, which I've used Future forever because it's such a bulletproof acrylic, gloss, it doesn't like that gloss as much. When I use the AK interactive gloss, which is, it's a little bit more of an expensive product, but it still comes in a big bottle, it does perfect. And I think it's just there's something about the finish layer that you get on the gloss from AK. It's just smoother. I mean, while it is gloss when you're using the Future, the AK stuff is just like it's just crazy smooth. It's like
My favorite.
in it. Oh yeah, it is. I mean, I told you about the Ultramat from them, but I had never used any of their other stuff because the Ultramat was the only thing that they had recommended in some of the airbrush courses I had taken. But as soon as I saw you had the full set and I was down there for that visit a couple weeks ago, I tried a couple drops of it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm buying some of this stuff. And like I said, when I tried that with the Flory wash, it made the Flory wash process just super easy. All I'm doing is brushing it on, hitting it with a hair dryer, and then cleaning it up with a moist Q-tip. But anyway, we just got off track.
Yeah, the other thing that I like to use as far as cleaning up with like sanding is the green scouring pads.
Oh yeah,
and use those around the wing roots.
Oh, that makes sense. I use those a lot for doing weathering when I'm actually dabbing weathering on tanks and stuff. I've never tried them for cleaning stuff. So,
Yeah.
But I'm definitely going to give the green scratch pad a try because I've got those laying around from painting. I've just never tried them for cleaning.
Yeah, going on through the tutorials, one of the other ones I've got up there is cleaning paint off of resin models with metal miniatures. I used to just take them, put them in a jar, and soak them in acetone. Come back later and it would just kind of brush off the paint. You can't do that with the plastic or the resin models because it'll eat it. So I use simple green. Just put that in a Ziploc bag or a jar or something like that, and throw the model in there and let it sit for a while. And by a while, it might be a couple of days. Then scrape off the paint,
Yeah, I've been using Purple Power on Doug's recommendation. I used Simple Green years ago with some Forge World models, but they're just degreasers. But that is the best process for getting it off. And there too, I find that fingernail brush really brushes down in like things like panel lines and strips everything up.
Yeah.
So after a 2 or 3 day soak in the Purple Power, the Simple Green, that stuff comes off really easy. So don't be afraid to, if you screw something up, throw it in the degreaser and start over.
Just take Kevin's advice and don't use the acetone on your plastic, or you can only do that one time. After that, the plane's no good.
Yeah, I found out that back in my late teens. I was using testers and Pactor paints. I don't think Pactor around anymore. And I found acetone. I was like, oh, this is great for thinning and cleaning up. And I thin in the testers in the glass bottle. That's not a problem. I put some in the Pactor bottle, which was plastic. And came back and the bottle was kind of saggy.
I've done almost the same thing when I used to paint Raw Partha Dungeons and Dragons miniatures back in the day. I made the mistake of I took a styrofoam cup and I poured acetone in it as a teenager.
Oh no!
I made a big mess on the desk.
Hey Kevin, you were talking earlier about you had some insights or thoughts about 3D models, and since we're talking about acetone and model prep, I think I've heard of some techniques for getting the print lines and stuff off with acetone gas.
Yeah, with
vapor.
Well, yeah, acetone, of course, you got to use a well-ventilated area. But with the 3D printed models, most of my experience has been with models they're produced by Shapeways, and I haven't kept up with terminology. They used to have the White Strong Flexible, which is fairly robust but grainy. And then they had the higher grade plastics that offered more detail but were more brittle. And those seem to have a waxy buildup on them. I don't know, it was part of the printing process or something. And I've heard people say that they've used acetone to get rid of that buildup. I don't go with pure acetone. I'll kind of dabble with fingernail polish remover, put that on a Q-tip, try and get some of that waxy buildup off with that. But
actually just wiping the model itself with a toned down
solution. with fingernail polish and a Q-tip and just wipe it down. And that's after I wash it with soap and water and scrape it or sand it a bit.
I saw a tutorial one time. It was for larger scale models, but because 3D printing is so common now, it was a pretty interesting technique where they took a metal paint can. I think had some way maybe with magnets. I think they used a metal paint can because you could use magnets, and they took I think this just simple shop towels or maybe even just paper towels and got a little acetone on those towels, used the magnets to hold the towels inside the can, then inverted the can, put the model they wanted to clean up on the lid and put the can over the lid, and the acetone vapor was enough to take those mold lines. I've never done it myself, but I was kind of intrigued by it. And it looked like a kind of thing you have to be kind of cautious about because it doesn't take long. The kind of thing that could get a lot of those mold lines off without even physically touching the model. I thought that was kind of interesting. And I wonder how much application it would have for our scale. I haven't done it on any model, much less an aircraft model at this point. But I wonder if it would be something that ends up happening at some point.
Yeah, the 3D printed 3D printing offers, an abundance of models that you can't get anyplace else. But for me, they're my least favorite items to work with, whether it's because it's grainy and it's just so much fun to try and fill that. And I've tried just kind of soaking it in super glue and sanding it after the super glue's dried. Sanding sealer from SD's Rocket days, filled the balsa wood. Nail salon stuff that ladies use to smooth their fingernails, just priming it over and over and over, scraping the surface rather than sanding it. I mean, just all kinds of things. They look okay, but then if you move up to the more expensive, finer detailed plastics, like I said, those are brittle, and then you've got to deal with the that waxy buildup.
Yeah. Have you played with any of the stuff off the resin printers that are commercially available now, like the Photon?
I am not sure.
I've I've messed with it a little bit. I was down at Ryan Kimmel's Radio Free Isfang guy at the Battle Barn, and he's got an Any Photon running, and he printed me out some stuff for some of my some weapons options that weren't available on the Adeptus Titanicus models. And that stuff is absolutely amazing. I mean, it prints at the pixel resolution of an iPhone, basically, because the way the printer works is it uses basically an iPhone screen, and that is what is hardening. It's a UV hardenable resin, and it's doing it 1 pixel at a time. It takes forever to print something. You can only do really small things, but for what we're doing with 1/200 scale aircraft, it's the ultimate. I mean, you could probably knock out 10 aircraft in it in about, I want to say it's about 6 hours, but the resolution on that stuff is amazing.
Oh, that sounds
And,
awesome.
Well, the only problem with it is it's messy. You've got a tank that you're pouring liquid resin into. It hardens under UV light, so you've basically got to keep it in a darker place, keep it covered, and then when you're done printing, it takes 90% alcohol to clean all the models off and get all the residue. You got to wear gloves the whole time because the stuff will get into your pores and then harden from when you go out in UV light. I mean, it is like a hazmat process to resin 3D print, but it's something I'm looking at getting my hands on probably around Christmas time this year and dabbling. It's just the models just look too good, especially when you're dealing with small scales like we are. So that's definitely something I'm going to explore more. So
Yeah, I don't think I've worked with any of those. The non-shapeways ones I've worked with have come from other people. They didn't say where they got them, but I know they weren't shapeways, and they weren't high resolution like you're talking about.
Yeah, when I get some, in fact, I'm going to Wargamers camp here in a couple weeks, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to get Ryan with his Any Photon to print me off a couple, random aircraft, like a couple HE-111s. And what I'll do is I'll get several of them, and I'll send one your way, send one Brett's way, and send one Doug's way, just so you guys can see what the quality is that comes off of it, and just mess with it, see what you think of it.
Okay.
I don't know if it's clear from our discussion so far, but we've all been doing a lot of hobbying, and that's why we're having this hobby episode. Tell us, Chris, you kind of bailed me out on some stuff. We were both painting similar aircraft and had a similar challenge with the yellow.
Oh yeah, I mean, the other day I was using the Focke-Wulf 190s where I was painting, and I was trying to get the yellow bands around the fuselage. So I was doing a bunch of things. I was trying to wrap the masking tape around it, using the masking tape from Tamiya, the stuff that's curvable. And I kept pulling paint up when I got it tight enough to keep the paint from running underneath the masking tape, or wasn't able to get a hard line, or it was just nothing but problems. And I was like, let me just try brush painting this one time. So I got a nice straight brush, and I used that Adavelt Sunset, I think it's called, is the color from GW, which
Berlin
is one
Sunset.
of their Yep, it's one of their base paints, so it's supposed to be more pigment heavy. But I found brushing that on, and then after you get your first coat of that on there good, then I grabbed the Ariel, I think it's Ariel yellow, and mix that, or Ariel, mix that 50-50 with the Adavelt Sunset, and compared it to my Vallejo Air War color RLM 06, Gelb from Luftwaffe color. It was almost the same color. I mean, it's just almost a perfect 1-for-1 color match when you mix those two 50-50, and that it worked perfect. I mean, I really like how the Focke-Wulf turned out, and that's how I'm going to paint yellow from now on.
I had a similar challenge. I was doing those. I was doing some yellow on some BF-109s. It's my second batch of 109s, and the first batch I did, I was brushing on the Gelb from Vallejo, the model air kit, and it sucked. I mean, every color, not just the yellow, but that first batch I did that I was brushing with those air colors were terrible. I mean, the colors look great, but I had to put on so many coats. It was just very tedious, and I wasn't ever happy with the yellow. In fact, I ended up, painting over it with kind of the process you just described. So my second batch, I thought, I'm going to do better this time. I'm going to mask, and I'm going to airbrush that same airbrush paint on the way it's supposed to be used, and it'll come out smooth. It'll cover great. It'll look awesome. Well, masking sucks when you're masking the tail of a 1 to 200 scale aircraft. That's not much fun there. I was not enjoying myself. And
I mean, it's stress. It is stress because it's impossible to get those lines straight, to get them in the right spot, to bend them around the freaking rudder flaps. It is just, it's a nightmare. And I was like, why am I doing this to myself? I got this yellow that's a really good yellow that I know covers on other models that I've done. I mean, that Ada Belt Sunset will damn near color black with 2 coats. And I was like, let's give this a try. And it was so much easier because I tried, brushing the gelb too from the Air War colors. And it's so thin that once you build up enough coats of it, they just don't seem to be even. So you get like texture to it and it just doesn't work. It's just not the way. I even tried spray painting a base white down to separate the yellow so I could use thinner coats of yellow, and that didn't work either. So, what's been your experience, Kevin, with painting yellow over dark colors?
Pretty much the same way. I get the same experience you guys have, but I almost exclusively use brushes for painting. So for parts that'll be yellow, if I'm going to use a spray, I'll spray it first and then brush around it. Otherwise, if I can use a decal, I will use a yellow decal or initial coat of a tan yellow or a yellow tan or a yellow brown, and then paint the yellow on over it.
Yeah, never paint yellow or white over black. It's never a good time if you can help it, right? Nope. We were texting back and forth because we were both coincidentally kind of working on the same project, different aircraft, but similar challenges. And I was texting how frustrated I was doing the masking because I was thinking I'm going to do better this time because I'm going to spray. And then you were telling me, man, screw the masking, do this thing I'm doing. And so I was looking at my table and I still, I had maybe half or maybe more than half already masked. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try it. And it worked awesome. Then I said, you know what? Since I have some already masked, I'm going to spray and just do a comparison. Well, even spraying, it did what I'd hoped it would do in that the lines were all nice, which wasn't really the main reason I was spraying. I was spraying because I wanted it to apply very smoothly and not require me to go over it with multiple, 6 coats or whatever, like I was doing before with a brush. So I sprayed it, and with 2, maybe 3 thin coats with the airbrush over those areas I had masked, it looked okay. It wasn't that the finish wasn't good. I just preferred the color. The tone to me gave more contrast using the color set that you described from GW. And, those are all color matched to go together. So lickety split, it was done. And I did not go, I actually ripped all the masking off all the other models and I painted them the way we just talked about. I did the same thing with white too. I was doing some white yesterday and today for my theater bands, for my Malta BF-109s. Yep. And similar process. I didn't intend to mask this one, but because it's smaller area, but just a little Celestra gray as a base coat. That's a GW base coat color. Then went back with some Olthan gray, which is a little lighter gray. And that's the trick, I think, with white. You're not really painting with white. You're painting with grays, right? So I got lighter with that. And then I thinned down a little Olthan gray with a drop or 2 of Around white on my wet palette. That's an ink for those of you guys who haven't used those. Yep. Just to thin it down a little bit and just finish those up with that. And it was probably a total of maybe 2 thin coats of each of those colors to get it to look really nice and smooth. And with a little brush control, no sweat. It was easy.
Yeah, it's definitely the way I'm going to go from now on when it comes to painting. Definitely the yellows. I do fall back on the airbrush a lot, and it's because I've taken so many airbrush courses. It's what I like to use, but there's definitely some applications at this scale, especially where it just doesn't work well. Now, one thing I did discover today when I was painting Spitfires, when I painted my son's Spitfires for his box that I bought him, the starter set box, I was actually using the blue tack method, where I was, masking off painting the base color brown, masking off all the brown, and then going back over with the airbrush and painting green. And that worked well, but, when you're working with blue tack, it's hard to get, not that British camouflage has to be exactly, perfect at this scale, but I wanted it to look pretty good, and I wasn't getting good consistency with it. So one thing that I've used in the past for other models is I've used a lot of the Vallejo masking fluid. And I was like, hey, I've got this stuff. Why don't I just give it a try real quick on this at this scale? Because I've used it mainly on big Night Titans and big tanks where you're masking off an entire panel after you've put some design on it, and you just don't want to get overspray on it. But I found today, and I'm going to post the pictures on the website also, that I was able to paint that base coat of brown down on the Spitfires using the MIG paint. And I just sit there with my pattern, my Spitfire pattern that I've got. I've got a nice black and white pattern of how they did camouflage. And I just basically painted on with the masking fluid, everywhere that the brown was supposed to stay. And then I hit it with green, let it dry for about 15 minutes, and that stuff pulled right up, and I had perfect British camouflage. And
Awesome.
It took me a fraction of the time that the blue tack was taking to apply and put on, because it's literally you're just brushing it on, and you paint it with the airbrush, and you just pull it off. And it might even work for painting yellow, but I've liked the brush method, but I'm experimenting now, so I may even give that another try and see how that works. So have you ever used masking fluid, Kevin?
I've used it before in the past for primarily clear canopy, things like that.
Oh yeah,
usually not for camouflage patterns. One of the tools I do use for painting the yellow or white wingtips or fuselage bands is a drafting compass, and I'll set the distance on that just so that I get the bands the same width on all the fuselages, or the wingtips all have the same length of yellow from tip to whatever point on the.
So you can just go back and check and have an instant verification on your brushwork of if you're in the right spot.
Well, or even before I start painting it, I'll just put the little tick marks.
Oh, you scored a little bit. Oh,
yes.
That makes sense.
Or you get the ones with the pencil lead in there and do that. And then the other thing I use that for is for decals, for rondelles, to get them the same distance from the wingtip edge or a panel line or something like that.
Well, that's smart. I've always just been kind of eyeballing, like, okay, if I put this corner at the intersection of these two panel lines on every wing, then I'll be in the same place every time. But that's far more precise way you're talking about.
And some of the models don't have panel lines.
Right.
Yeah, true.
Hey, back to that thing with the blue tack. I remember Doug saying he had kind of some challenges because it was a little messy. And you had said you were looking for better consistency. What you meant by that was those are stencils that they use on the real aircraft, right, to get the camouflage pattern. So you're
they are. It was basically, from what my understanding of it, they were basically like large sheets of cardboard that they would lay out on the aircraft, and they were cut to a specific size, and then they would spray paint them. And the one thing I'm trying to figure out, and I haven't figured out yet, and maybe Kevin might know this because you've been doing this for a lot longer than I have. I keep finding references to A and B models with Spitfires and Hurricanes, and I've seen some things where they say things like, "Well, they flipped the pattern," and I'm just trying to figure out, was that like all through the war, or you just find tiny references to it, and I haven't been able to find like a definitive source on Spitfire paint yet. Find out, what I should be doing. Not that there's the scale, but
I don't remember which book it is, but I saw something like what you're talking about. The picture I saw almost looked like a rubber mat that had the camouflage pattern, had factory workers putting it on a wing. But the A and the B pattern was pretty much a mirror image, left to right. They would just flip the pattern over. The other thing they would do would be change the colors. So there was A B pattern, and then they would have different colors sometimes. So you'd get 4 variations.
Yeah, it matters. That makes sense. I like I said, I've just been starting to dabble in RAF stuff, and my knowledge on RAF paint stuff is pretty poor. So I've been finding some stencils online that other people use for larger scale models, and I've just been going off them, and I just keep finding these references. But that explains a lot.
And that's during the research, trying to figure out the subject, or more details about the subject. Try and find the original pictures and make sure they haven't reversed the photograph, and then see how the patterns run, which way it is. And then if you get a couple of planes in formation, see if they're all the same, or if one of them's got an A, one of them's got a B, something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's cool. What do you guys do for research? I saw you had a big drawing of that camouflage pattern printed out on your workbench, Chris.
Yeah, like I said, I talked about it in an earlier episode. I've been kind of leaning heavy on some of the European modeling sites that make decals for like 135 and 148. One of the things that a lot of those guys do is they post pictures of not just their decals, but their decals basically in a black and white image laying on the airplane already. So it's kind of like this is how you would apply it, but what they're actually giving you is the entire way to paint the model. So I've been finding those every time now when I print, whenever I paint a model, I go out online, I find the picture of the airplane I want to paint, I print it off, and I've only been doing painting patterns where I can find both a side profile and a top-down view, because I find that top-down view is just key to finding the right wing patterns and stuff like that. Some camouflage, it doesn't matter. The Russians, they did a lot of different things, so you can pretty much get away with anything. But with the RAF and the Luftwaffe, especially with the Luftwaffe splinter camouflage, I mean, they had very similar shapes, and to make it look like it's Luftwaffe, it's gotta have the right shapes to it. Same thing with RAF.
I always print out a picture of the aircraft I'm working on with like a color plate or whatever reference picture I have, and I'll do an 8.5 by 11, and I'll tack it up right there in front of me, so I always have something to kind of glance at. It helps me just like on my 109s I'm working on right now. It helps me. I can glance at it and go, am I achieving the kind of the color I want on the camouflage? If it's some modeled pattern on the side, it just and I don't have to go anywhere to find that picture again. I've got it just pinned up right there in front of me in my workspace. But I can tell you, I've been wearing out Pinterest, and my my ladies' fashion and my recipes are on point, but I'm also able to find tons of color plates for all the aircraft I'm working on. I'd really recommend anybody that's got a mobile phone and to check it out, because it's a quick way to find all kinds of stuff. Then to have a place to save it, you can make boards where you save photos in different categories. So I've got a board for ZG-76 or ZG-26, and all my different period photos for different parts of war for that unit are in there, and I can flip through it, print from it, do other things with it. Have you guys tried that?
Yeah, Pinterest is definitely not just for cake bakers. So, which is, I think, what a lot of the community believes it's for. The one function, I mean, I'm a photographer. It's what I do on the outside, when I'm not modeling. It's what I'm going to school for. But one of the amazing things about Pinterest too is that once you find an image you like, there's a function in Pinterest where you can actually highlight a portion of an image, not the entire image, and it will take that portion of the image and it will actually go out and scour the web for images that match just that portion of the image. That can be really, especially when you're dealing with military vehicles and stuff, that can be an absolute boon for finding amazing stuff. So
it's
what
been
are
kind of my main source? That's been sort of the main thing I've been using, because I can, even if I'm say at work and I got a little downtime, I can kind of just peruse it and add things to my different boards for ideas for camouflage patterns. It's been pretty cool.
Yeah. What have you been using, Kevin, what's your go-to source for reference material? I mean, you've been at this a lot longer than us.
Usually these days it's just the web, and I'll do a search on the unit, aircraft, or the individual and see what comes up. A lot of times it'll go to Pinterest. And then I've been doing the same thing. Get a couple of pictures, print them out, left, right, top, and bottom if need be. And then as I'm going along in the painting process, I like to write down what paint I used, and then draw an arrow to this part of the pattern, say the Vallejo model color, whatever, so that I have a record of it. And then I just keep a notebook of what paints I'm using on what models.
Yeah. Speaking of going, down the labeling certain paint types, you talked a lot about last time, and we've talked in the past about some of the different paint brands we use. But one of the things that I know me and Brett have both realized is that not every paint company is the same, and there's a lot of variation between what one company will call RLM06 and another company will call RLM06. And I know that you touched a little bit on in the last podcast, hey, these are colorized photos and these are old photos, and who really knows what it looks like, but, go with something you like. But have you found any sources that you find as definitive, or have you found a paint set that you tend to lean on the most for, I guess I would say, more accurate color? Or do you go more with what feels good? What you think looks good?
TLAR, that looks about right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I've got there was a customer that I guess really liked what I did decal wise, and he sent me some fabric from an actual plane, that was shot down. It was Hurricane or something. So I've got some samples of actual aircraft skin.
Oh wow! You've got to post this online first, man. You've got to now. You can't just throw that out there to the community and not post pictures.
They're just inch by inch kind of thing.
It doesn't matter. I mean, that is badass.
But still, they're over the years, how much is that painted? When it was put on the plane in 1940, 41, 42 or whatever, set out in the sun, was driven around the sky, had all kinds of petroleum products thrown all over it, and wiped down by the mechanics, and then so and it's
I had an experience. My first batch of 109s, I painted with the model air colors. I had they have their kits, right, with different air colors, and I really like the colors. I mean, to me, the colors seem really. I wanted to call them authentic. I don't know if that I could actually say that, because who knows, right? Like we said, but they look like I expected them to look. Let's put it that way. The colors, right? It when I painted. But the thing I was troubled by is that when I was brushing with them, it was so tedious, because, like I was mentioning earlier, I had to put on so many coats, and it just they're airbrush paints really, and certainly you can brush with them. It just wasn't super easy. So I thought, what, I got this licked. My next batch, I'm gonna find kits or at least the separate RLM colors I want to use that are formulated for brush painting. And like Hataka Hobbies, they have their red line and their blue line, and I think it's the blue line is formulated for brush work, and they have similar kit where it's early war Luftwaffe stuff. So I snatched that up. I thought I was all clever and everything, and I get to work on them on my second batch of 109s, and they do go down great, perfect for a brush. But the colors are just different. They're just different. Not a problem. Like I don't look at them and go, oh man, I've ruined these models. They're just different. And the only way that would be maybe an issue is if I wasn't painting a whole batch. You know what I'm saying? So where the whole squadron is going to be uniform. But if you compared them to a previous squadron I've done, or somehow mix those aircraft together, you'd be able to see a subtle difference. And
one of the things I've noticed too is when you're dealing with this scale, and I think that's part of it for me, is if you were painting a 148 or you were painting a larger model, and you were using some of these paints from Air War and Vallejo line, and the other ones that are supposed to be close to RLM, like MiG. I think that there's a huge difference between painting a large model and painting a 1/200 model, especially when it comes to contrast. Because if there's one thing I didn't like about the Focke-Wulf 190s I used the colors from the same line that they say that were supposed to be similar and on that aircraft, and the contrast is just so close that the pattern becomes so subtle at 1/200 that it's harder to see, if that makes sense. So it's almost like exactly. It's almost like I wish that I'd gone with Kevin's rule and just said, screw it, stop sticking to the numbers and just go with something that looks more right. And I think when I do my next batch of 190s, which will be a different squadron, it'll be a Western Front squadron instead of an Eastern Front squadron, that's definitely the route I'm going to go.
And I have a similar problem with the World War II German bomber with the dark green and the black green. You put it on and you can't tell where one ends and one begins.
Yeah, and that was the exact two colors that I was having the problem with on the Focke-Wulfs, because those were the colors that they used on the Eastern Front a lot during the summer months. And
same here.
Yep, JG52. That's what they used on theirs on the Greenheart Squadron, and no 54. And I don't want a Grognard to come after me on that. But yeah, on the Greenhearts, it was definitely a problem. So, but it's it's one of those live and learn things. The planes look good, but they just don't have the pop that I want them to have. And I think part of that's just because the first planes I saw at 1/200 painted was your 109s, Brett, and it was like, oh man, Brett's 109s look so damn good. I want them to look that good.
Those colors are beautiful. That's the whole reason why I like was drawn to the Luftwaffe. It's because of those 109s. I think it's gray and dark green. That combination is so. That just speaks to me. Like that's what Luftwaffe colors are. But then you start doing other models and you realize, oh wait, black green and dark green go together for this aircraft, and that's where we run into that problem where, unless you're real close to it, you don't see where one line starts and the other, you know what I mean? Where they come together, it just looks kind of real dark.
Yeah, I'll be the first person to say the Luftwaffe were the most styling Air Force when it came to World War II, without a doubt. I mean, some of their camouflage patterns are just really cool. So we got some neat ones on the American side, but I mean, a lot of our stuff was just like, okay, like especially, on the Pacific front, it's like paint it dark blue on the top, light blue on the bottom, call it done.
It's funny, now that I'm doing this Malta project, I kind of expected stuff would look a lot of desert camouflage, like all the Western desert and, North Africa stuff looks like at least, I've seen in pictures. But in Malta, it wasn't that way. They were mostly, they were flying out of Sicily, I guess. And the first batch of 109s that showed up, they were, straight from France, and they still look like, the patterns you see on those Battle of Britain aircraft. But the later 109s, the F models, they had some unique color patterns that I get to mess with. So I'm going to be doing some different colors. I think I'm going to do a mix. I think I'm going to do my second batch with all the F models I'm going to do. I think I'm going to do 2 separate patterns that represent a couple different units. And some of them there were some, at least from the historical, photos and things I could find, there were some interesting one-offs where individual pilots had some really unique color patterns that you don't see anywhere else in any of the other photos. So it's kind of cool. We'll see.
Yeah, it's one of the fascinating things I found about the Russian squadrons is that was one of the few things that the Russian pilots were allowed to do. They were allowed to personalize their aircraft in a lot of ways, but not only that, but squadron commanders basically had permission to basically do whatever they wanted to with their airplanes. So, which is a little bit different from the other air forces. So that's why you see such huge variations in camouflage patterns in Russian camouflage. So, like I said, it's just it's a neat thing to mess with. What's your favorite air arm to paint, Kevin? Out of all the color palettes and weird camouflage, what's the one that you tend to like to paint the most?
When they're finished, either Italian or French.
Yep, I can see that. So those Maki paint jobs are just wicked. So that leopard print looking, just with the white stripes, and those are pretty beautiful airplanes.
Yeah, they're my least favorite to paint, but when they're done, I think they're the ones that look the best.
Well, since we're getting into Malta and we got you here, what is your method for painting spots? I mean, because I'm about to go down that, and it's something I haven't done before, and it's something you see a little bit in Japanese aircraft too. So how do you go about it? Is it just painstaking brushwork?
Yeah, there's 2 ways. One of them is in one of those tutorials. There's a Sea Dragon where
I haven't gotten that one yet.
Yeah, it's I use a stippling technique where I just take a natural sponge, and I'll tear off a little bit of a sponge, and I've got a lot of alligator clips that are stuck on the ends of dowels for holding models, and I'll just stick the sponge in the alligator clip, and then dip that in thinned out paint future, and then kind of stipple the model. I use that a lot for the fuselages of the Luftwaffe. But
so you're mixing future into your paint mix?
Yeah, I'll have a little puddle of future, and I have a little puddle of paint, and I'll just dip it in there and blot it on something until I get it the way I want it, and then start hitting the model with it. And then the other thing I do is very small brush.
Kind of doing tiny dots as you're going. I've seen somebody do that before with I can't remember what it was on. I want to say it was they were doing battle damage, and they were actually stippling in tiny little nicks, and then they would go back on each of the ones that they rapidly stippled, and they would paint highlights on them. But sounds like a similar method. So I'd love to see a video of you doing that.
I'll have to send you a picture of some 1/300 scale CR-42s.
Absolutely, because like I said, that's definitely something that's in my future. So be good doing that now with Brett working on the Malta campaign.
Order another batch of aircraft because I'm about to be done with this first batch of 109s. I think I'm going to do 110s next, which will be kind of fun because those are going to be like a desert color.
Yeah, I was doing the Snoopy dance today because I got the email from Dave that my order is on the way. So my next batch of LA5s and the other aircraft that I needed to complete some of my projects, I got some Oscars for the Japanese, and it's going to be like Christmas as soon as those freaking airplanes show up. So because I'm pretty done with everything I've got right now.
Working on any projects right now, Kevin? You're not doing a lot of painting, you say, except your own stuff, right?
I'm finishing up commissions. The only airplanes I've got right now are 1/300 scale.
Tiny.
Which game is that you're doing those for?
These are for somebody probably going to use them for Check Your Six.
Okay. Not to put you on the spot and ask you everything about your business, but about how much do you charge to paint like a 6 squadron aircraft 1/200 scale? For the listeners, if they're looking to have somebody do that for them.
Let me see if I can.
You don't have to give a quote out of on the air if you don't want to. But I was
I don't
was wondering
mind.
what the ballpark was.
Yeah, I don't want to get it wrong. Okay, a 1/200 single engine fighter painted. You provide the model. I paint it $10.
Oh, that's not bad. I mean, this show might get you some business. I've seen a lot of people out there that are kind of like, I love playing these games, but I can't paint. I mean, maybe Doug will hire you. It's nice when Doug's not here to defend himself. He was lurking earlier, but he said he had a really bad internet connection and he took off.
Yeah, but armies, tank armies, Soviet tank armies, Napoleonics. Yeah, no, I'm done.
Oh, Napoleonics. I dabbled in that a long time ago, and that is just mind-numbing pain. I think I got about 10 infantry done, and I was like, no, not at this scale. This is not. No, I'm not staying, because I used to love Napoleonics and the history of it, but that is a level of gaming that I tried to get into, but it was like I don't have the patience for this. So I need to go with something with a larger scale. It's not nearly as detailed. So what else we got tonight? So we talked about paint variation. I think we've been through just about everything.
I was wondering, we had a little, I was admiring your photos that you posted on our Facebook page.
Oh, that's right. You want to talk a little bit about taking pictures.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
you're the
and to be honest,
here.
I am. And to be honest, I haven't been using my professional photography skills a whole lot when it comes to my models. It's just been, I've been so busy with actual photography stuff that I'm doing for the university. And I'm actually teaching at the university a little bit now. So doing my own projects, and believe it or not, it takes a lot of time to set stuff up. But what I've been basically doing right now is I'm using a daylight balanced LED light that's about 2 feet wide, putting that over my models. I painted that little background that I use for mine with the airbrush really quick. Doug teased me about the purples being in the sky, but I was like, hey, dude, it's dusk. Leave me alone. And that's basically what I've been doing, is just putting that light directly over the top. And the key to lighting, especially aircraft, I mean, lighting any model, is not getting a point light source. If you're trying to light something with a light bulb, you're just trying to just point one light at it, or you're using your cell phone and you're using the flash on the cell phone and the light on the cell phone, you're going to get just an ugly direct light picture. And just to give you a little bit of photography background, the reason why pictures don't look that good that way, and the reason why flashes on the top of cameras don't look good, is you don't walk around with the sun on your forehead. And that's not how the human brain is used to looking at three-dimensional objects. You're used to the sun being off at a different angle, or you're used to God providing what we call the natural softbox and giving you those clouds out there and diffusing all that light and giving you nice soft light that comes in from all angles and evenly lights everything. So what you want to look for when you're doing your models, if you're going to do it with a cell phone, one of the things I recommend is you don't want to be holding your cell phone. You want to be bracing your cell phone on something very stable. And because that allows your cell phone to take a little bit more time taking the picture, because it's doing all that stuff automatically for you. Try to get yourself a daylight balanced bulb. If you don't, learn a little bit about color temperature, because a lot of people try to take pictures with incandescent light and they're like, my pictures are really orange. And it's like, yeah, because you're using incandescent light. And they just look ugly. Or they'll use, especially some of the older fluorescents produce some really ugly green Castle models. So if you're a painter and you're painting models, you should be using daylight balanced bulbs anyway. Daylight balanced bulbs burn at about 5,500 Kelvin and color temperature wise, and they're basically the equivalent of sunlight. and they're basically a balanced light. They're not too blue. They're not too yellow. So those are the big things. But steady, good light source. And the only other things I've been doing is I've been pulling them into Photoshop, and I've been putting some diagrams on them, pulling some images for their unit icons and putting that on there. And if you want to do that stuff and you don't have a program like Photoshop, because it is kind of pricey now that they've gone to a pay system on it where you're paying monthly to use Photoshop, and you've got your hands on PowerPoint, you can do the same exact thing in PowerPoint. You can pull that image into PowerPoint. PowerPoint actually has some very limited picture modification where you can control your contrast a little bit. You can brighten your exposure up a little bit. There's a lot of free programs online that'll do that for you too. I can't say enough about going online. If you really want to take good pictures of your models, don't just listen to me. Go online. There's about how to photograph your models, how to build light tints, how to build reflected light, what types of lights are good. But like I said, the models I've been doing right now, I've been doing it really quick. I use a daylight balanced LED bulb above it, and I'm taking it with my iPhone 10. That's what I've been doing.
I really like your group shots too of your finished projects with the whole squadron laid out with the text, the little text information.
Yeah, I mean, it just gives a lot of flair to it. It for me, I'm a narrative player. Where me, you, and Doug are all players, and for me, a lot of it is not just rolling dice and painting models, but it's the story behind those airplanes. I've been getting into some of these Japanese aces and what they went through and what the war was like for those guys, and aces that we don't have in the game yet, and trying to figure out ways to bring those aces to life. I like to do squadrons that have a history to them, and find those significant characters and all those different squadrons and figure out what airplanes were around them. I'm reading the book right now on the American Volunteer Group, and from Osprey, and it's a really short read. I recommend that to anybody that wants to do P-40s, and it's just fascinating. The book gives you all the little things like how they numbered their aircraft, how many days they actually flew their aircraft, and who was flying their aircraft, and things they had to do to modify the gun sights because they weren't allowed to buy the gun sights from the American government. And it's all those little things, and you start learning these pilots' names and what their numbers were, and you can find registries out there. Like I found that Corsair registry for VF-17, which it listed, actually wasn't just VF-17, it was all the Navy and Marine Corps Corsair aces, and it listed their squadron and their tail number. So I basically went out and I found all the VF-17 guys, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do a squadron full of aces, but I found 3 of the aces, did it a little bit earlier war, and then put, Joe Bonats and, some miscellaneous guys in there with tail numbers that weren't recorded as aces, and built a squadron around that. I think if you get into that level of it, you really enjoy the hobby a lot. That's why I do it. So, that's what I'm trying to portray in the pictures.
Awesome. Pretty much set the standard for our page on the photos.
Wait till Doug gets started, man. Doug's a professional air photographer. He's coming back from Malaysia right now, and he's heading out somewhere west because he got on the fly hired to, fly somewhere else and take pictures of airplanes. I could only hope to have a job as sexy as his when it comes to the camera, but we just got to get him taking pictures. Actually, we got to get him painting his aircraft so he'll take pictures of them.
We got to get him to get home so he can do it.
Oh, I know.
He's not getting any painting done where he is.
So, yep, without a doubt. So, is we got anything else to cover tonight? Kevin, you got anything else to add, man?
I do not. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, Kevin, like I said, you are always welcome on the show when we're talking, especially when we're doing hobby sods. And we'd love to have you back anytime. I've got some stuff I'm getting ready for you. Like I said, I just started back to school, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to focus on things, but there's some Russian stuff coming your way. And so how's the what are you working on right now? What are the projects in the hopper?
The projects in the hopper, there's some for Malta, but at the top are some 1/100 German Cold War and some small ones, I think about 1/300 scale for an expansion of a game called, it's Memoir 44's expansion.
Oh, very cool.
Thanks for coming on, Kevin. We really wanted to have you on to talk hobby once we learned about your extensive hobby background. So this is perfect.
Well, thanks for having me.
For all our listeners, go out there, dig around in Kevin's page. There's some great resources on that page. If you need decals, he is the man. I can tell you personally, I've done 3 squadrons now with his decals, and I've got a bunch more of his decals waiting to go on airplanes. I can't wait to get those Normandy Nima decals on my Yak 3s. That's the other thing that's in this package from Dave. I can't wait to get that squadron in the air. But yeah, definitely check him out. Check out High Altitude Hobbies. They're not one of the corporate dirtbags they're not throwing us any money. We're not shilling for them. They're just good guys that are offering good products out there. The Flory stuff is amazing. And if you're looking for something to speed your model time up, that's definitely something you need to look at. But that's all we got for Lead Pursuit. You guys have a good night. Good night, guys.
Good night.